Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the fourth and final presentation in our series, Rethinking Consumer Engagement, Leading with Empathy, Equity, and Integrity. I'm Sharon Topper, Professor of Marketing and Business Studies in the Marketing Communication Department at Emerson College, and I'm so pleased to see you all here with us today. Some housekeeping before we get started. Those of you who have been to the other sessions know the drill. The conversation will go on for about 30 minutes, and then we will open for Q&A from the audience. But if you have questions at any point, please put it into the Q&A box down on the bottom right of your screen. Questions for both Kristin or Jay. And when we call your name, we will open up your audio so you can ask the question. Please also include any information that's relevant so we can have some context. And so without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Anthony Pinder, AVP of International and Global Engagement at Emerson College, to tell you more about our session.
Thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anthony Pinder, and I serve as the Associate Vice President for Internationalization and Global Engagement here at Emerson College. And first, I want to just commend our faculty colleagues in the School of Communication and the Department of Marketing Communication, respectively, for what has been an extraordinary speaker series, Rethinking Consumer Engagement, Leading with Empathy, Equity, and Integrity. Over the course of the sessions of this series, we heard from Project Runway star and creator of Making the Cut, Tim Gunn, speak about how he integrates integrity, mentorship, and empathy into everything he does. We also had the opportunity to engage with an impressive panel of women as they discussed the world of women in leadership roles and the issues they still face in the workplace. Then an esteemed panel spoke to us about what really matters to consumers as they navigate the companies they eventually choose to do business with. Now, as Emersonians, what we know for sure is that a more equitable society is in fact a better society. And here are a few data points to help us underscore what intentionality regarding equity can do for a business. According to the Boston Consulting Group, companies with a more diverse workplace have 19% higher revenue than their competition. And according to Josh Bersin research, inclusive companies are 1.7 times more likely to be innovation leaders in their market. And the McKinsey Consulting Group reports that racially and ethnically diverse companies outperform industry norms by 35%. For our final installment in the speaker series, we take a deeper look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the ways in which these concepts shape decisions from the lens of executive level management, or the C-suite, as it's also known. To explore this with us, it is my great pleasure to introduce Jay Francis, Vice President of Current Series and Diversity at Disney Television Animation, TVA. Jay is responsible for managing the creative direction of productions on current series for Disney TVA and works closely with the development and recruitment teams to identify, secure, and mentor diverse creative talent for Disney and Disney Junior. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Jay has been at Disney since 2007. In his tenure, he has overseen creative direction on a multitude of original animated series, including Disney's 5-time Emmy Award-winning Phineas and Ferb, Emmy Award-nominated Big City Greens and Amphibia, and most recently, the Disney Plus original animated adventure movie, Phineas and Ferb, the movie Candace Against the Universe. In his diversity role, Jay has created an educational institutions program for which he regularly visits and speaks with students at key universities across the country, as well as the country's prestigious arts and animation schools. He also oversees the television animation studio's apprentice writers and diversity development programs. Interviewing Jay this afternoon will be Emerson's own Dr. Kristin Lieb, Associate Professor in the Department of Marketing Communication, who also teaches in the Marlborough Institute for Liberal Arts and Interdisciplinary Studies. Her research focuses on branding and representational equity in popular music, and her teaching explores how major consumer and entertainment companies can better incorporate DEI ideas, initiatives, and processes into their products and brands. And now, I give you a conversation with Jay Francis of the Walt Disney Company, interviewed by our very own Professor Kristin Lieb. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate your thoughtful introductions. And thank you, Sharon, for putting on what has been one of the best speaker series I have ever seen at my time at Emerson. You developed it thoughtfully, you delivered it thoughtfully, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. So thank you very much for including me in this. And it is so great to see you, Jay. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today. We know how busy you are, and this is just such an important conversation. We're so happy to have you here.
My pleasure, Kristin. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's get right into it. So in your view, Jay, why is it so important to invite and recruit actively people from diverse backgrounds into DTA's story development and storytelling processes?
Well, looking at it from a creative point of view, if you truly want to be known as authentic storytellers and create stories that have real meaning and truth to them, then it's indeed critical that the people telling the stories bring their unique and specific experience to the table. In my experience, even in animation and kids programming, the stories and the characters that truly resonate, that our diverse audience connect with, are those stories that are sincere, that are pulled from actual experiences. With access to so much information, kids are much more sophisticated today than when I was growing up, for sure. So if we want our audiences to stay engaged, and we have to make sure that we're constantly providing stories that are relevant to the people and experiences in their lives.
Absolutely. So in your work with DTA, can you sort of tell us the story of one project that you're particularly proud of, like that has sort of met the ideals that you're sort of shooting for?
So when I got your question on this, I was just sort of thinking of like if there's one sort of show, and actually, and I thought about it. It's like, you know what? It's not actually the show. It's not the show. It's more of the program that we created, and Tony had mentioned it earlier. 3 years ago, when I expanded my role into the DEI work that I'm doing now, one of the first things that I needed to do was to look at expanding our talent outreach. And for me, that was bringing my focus and attention to writers. As an animation studio, we have always had a robust art and animation recruitment team. You would find them at the Cal Arts and the Savannahs and the Ringling schools, and sort of reaching out to artists and potential animators and designers. But we never really recruited for writers, and writers are really where when you're talking about either the development of a show or you're talking about the startup of a greenlit show in production, you need a writing staff. I mean, that's really where it's all going to begin. So what I wanted to do was through our school outreach and writers program, and also generally from a grassroots word of mouth process, I wanted to connect with up and coming writers who we could staff or train to become staff writers. The response was so overwhelming, and I actually remember one of my first forays back in 2019, when we could actually go out and interact personally with people, was to go to schools that had both high-profile screenwriting programs, as well as schools that catered to a diverse student population. And I remember one of my first stops was Emerson, and I was asking the question to both students and faculty because I had never gotten samples or scripts from these programs. Said, is anyone interested in animation? And it was interesting the response I got to that. Part of it was, well, we thought you needed to know how to draw. It's like, well, no, I got artists. I need storytellers. Well, I thought you needed to know how you put an animated show together because that would inform your writing. Well, that's helpful, but you learn that on the job. I'm not looking for technical directors. I'm looking for storytellers. Oh, I didn't have an animation sample. I didn't know who to send it to. I had all of these different obstacles that I had to overcome. But now it made sense to me as to why I was not getting samples from students at these schools. So once I sort of cleared the decks on that, the response was overwhelming. And with that came an incredibly vast array of some folks who were ready to be staffed at that point, and if there were jobs available, we sort of would share the samples with the crews who were hiring. But there were also a lot of really well-written scripts from people that still needed some work, needed some training, but this was the moment to look at this and say, okay, we can't just send folks away and then say, when you get some experience, come back. What we wanted to do was create and figure out a way to tap into the potential of these writers. And that's really how our apprentice training program started. And with that comes every crew has an apprentice writer that the crew hires themselves. And through that training process, they put themselves in a position to be considered a staff writer. So, so really the impact of this can be seen on every series at TVA and Disney Junior. And I guess that to me is the project or the program that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really beautiful because you're showing people how they can fit into what you do, right?
Yeah.
There's no place that you would be trained to understand that if you didn't have those skills, you would still be able to contribute in this way. And when I'm sort of thinking about this through a diversity lens, I'm thinking you're literally diversifying animation because you're making room for people who never considered themselves to be part of that.
Right. I mean, I think, going back to the original question you had about, sort of background and the experience of people. I mean, obviously, working on the creative side before I expanded my role into the DEI work, I was in the writing rooms. I as a development executive, I was seeing who was pitching content to us. I was seeing what we were optioning and what we were picking up, and so that's what sort of like drove me into when asked what I would do on the diversity and inclusion and equity front from senior leaders and creative leaders at TV Animation. I said, this is what I would do. I would go out and I would make sure that we, first of all, that we were getting connected to schools outside of the art and animation schools, because those schools typically are not focused in on writers. Animation is part of the joy of animation is that, you have writers who are artists who are writers. There's a lot of crossover there. So certainly, notwithstanding the fact that I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily a recruiter per se, but, there's a lot of crossover in what I do. And while I'm focused in on writers, and that sort of was my priority, just through my school outreach and I guess my, for lack of a better term, ambassadorship as Disney, representing Disney TVA in this capacity, I've come across a lot of interns and production people and artists. One of my interns is joining us today, and so it was just through those connections that we started to very much broaden the scope of the folks who are now on our radar. And again, I'm really sort of tapped in and proud of that we can use we can use that thought process in terms of diversity to help diversify our studio as well.
That's great. So you bring more people in to begin with, more people who maybe never imagined themselves doing this, who have a wider, array of creative sort of thoughts and directions and so on. And then when you actually get them, into the program, into the apprentice program, maybe even beyond, are there certain things that you do in the writer's room itself to try to encourage people to continually tap into their various lenses on things to make sure that?
Well, I would actually take yes, definitely in terms of the writer's room and the crew, but I would even take a larger and broader scope of that. And, and one of our main priorities has always been to tap to our own talent for ideas and consultation, and stretch assignments where they can sort of move over from what their primary job focus is and try something else at the same time that they're doing the job that they were hired for. As an animation studio, as you might imagine, we are rich with incredible creative talent. It's talent that just isn't relegated to designing characters or writing or editing. It's talent that has vast and varying interests and incredible imaginations and a passion for creating. We would be foolish if we didn't utilize this amazing group of creatives to extend and enhance not only the projects that they are developing, but creating a pipeline of and a system for true innovation in technology, music, art, production processes. You know, the list is endless. And, you know, as an animation studio, you know, it's easy to just look at, oh, it's artists and writers, and that's the creative process. Well, there's voiceover, there's casting, there's music, there's the technology side of that. And, you know, specific to what we had to go through with the pandemic and how animation in general has been able to continue on during the pandemic when other parts of the entertainment industries have not been able to do so. The innovation that came out of just how, you know, our ID department and our voice recording, how are we going to be able to continue doing this while everyone's working from home? And they did an amazing job, and it sort of kept, you know, it kept animation going. Now, was it ideal? No, you know, I don't think that, you know, I saw a lot of articles and stories about, is this the new normal going forward once the, you know, pandemic subsides? And, you know, I don't think that's the case. I think the learnings of what we've done right now is such that you can look at it more from a hybrid sort of situation, where sometimes you're in the studio and sometimes you don't need to be. But I think, you know, as it relates to, again, our talent, we have always looked for ways to highlight innovation in anything we do. And, you know, if you go back to even the history of Walt Disney and some of his quotes and some of his perspectives, you know, innovation was always a thing with Walt. And I think this is just a sort of a follow-up to that thought process in terms of just making sure that we have a wonderful group of talented individuals who are passionate about what they do and bring a unique perspective based on their upbringing, their experiences, where they've come from, what, you know, their culture, their heritage. So as I said earlier, it would be foolish for us to not tap into that, especially when folks are saying, please, like, let me help, let me try to you know, bring more to the table than just the fact that you hired me to do this, to draw characters or to write this script.
Totally. It's cross training is so critical, and it's, I mean, it's such a great growth opportunity for everybody there. Yeah. It's also making me wonder about you recruit writers and they develop stories, and then, you know, the stories are written and then they're produced and then they're marketed. And I'm wondering, do we see any crossover from the writing area into sort of production or into marketing, or are there similar initiatives that look to sort of bring different people who may not have imagined themselves in those capacities in on these kind of productions?
Yeah, well, you know, what's interesting is, and oftentimes, especially with students, they'll you know, they'll reach out to me and they'll sort of reference the fact of like, well, you know, I want to be a writer, but, you know, is it, and I know how challenging that is and how competitive it is at a company like Disney. So should I get in on the production side with the idea of then I can move over? And there's some, you know, there's some truth to that, you know. But the flip side of that also is the fact that, you know, typically when we're looking for people, we are investing time and money into somebody who wants to be, say, a current series executive or a development executive or wants to work in production. So, you know, you have to balance that with the idea of once somebody does make it into our studio, you want to, from a talent retention point of view and quite frankly, a morale point of view, allow people to sort of explore and have opportunity to get something that maybe they thought they were interested in production, but they found themselves more drawn to the development side, or more drawn to technology, or, in certain cases, more interested in being outside of the animation and moving into live action, or moving into some other aspect, like you had sort of referenced earlier, marketing or something like that. And so you want to allow for that, for that option. And I think, Disney just being as large as it is, affords you opportunity to consider that. But, where that's born out of is like, you have to do the job that you were hired to do well.
Totally.
You have to start with that,
Totally.
and get people on your side, get people sort of supporting you on that. And then I think the world is yours. I mean, I think basically at that point, as much as somebody may come to rely on you as a writer or as an artist or what have you, I think what's more important is like supporting what you truly want to do to be happy at the company. And so I think that's typically the approach that we all take when we're as we talked about earlier, identifying and bringing in people into the company who have a certain skill set and are talented, and perhaps most importantly are passionate about the world of animation, and passionate about the art form, and passionate about working and collaborating with a team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking there may be additional creative opportunities to sort of embed and encode the kinds of values that you want to see in all of your production and productions in the production and marketing side. Like if you kind of like did outreach for creative marketers, right? They might be able to tell more creative stories, or better position the more creative stories that you're telling, right? And
obviously when we're making a series, part of the job of the creative executive, which I am one, is to interface with all of the different stakeholders and key folks in, whether it's media relations, marketing, programming, on-air promotions, in the case of something like, I say, a Phineas and Ferb, where you actually have a franchise hit, it would be part of my job to interface with the folks at the parks who wanted to create walk-around characters of Phineas and Ferb, So it's not our job to make those designs and costumes. It's our job to make sure they're on model. It's our job to make sure of how the character, as it relates to the creative aspects of the show, are consistent with any other, whether it's merchandise or ancillary uses of the characters or the storylines in any other capacity at the studio. So that's where you get that sort of connective tissue of, a writer may be responsible for creating what ultimately, how a character acts in the parks, or an artist has created a look or a facial expression that is utilized in published books and comic books and other way, that the Phineas and Ferb characters on a box of macaroni and cheese is utilizing an artist's pose, and facial expression. So there is that sort of interconnection. And again, as it sort of circles back and relates to the talent that we're bringing in-house, I think it's all interconnected, just from the standpoint that, at the end of the day, we are authentic storytellers, and if you're going to be an authentic storyteller, you have to be authentic from every sort of point of view. And how that manifests itself is making sure that you're tapping into talent that has experienced some of experiences that other people don't have, so that you do have a broad range. Because look, I think really what we're trying to do is tell stories that relate to our diverse audience. And so the more stories that you can connect with your audience, the better you are from a business standpoint, obviously, but also from just the idea of, especially in kids programming, the idea of, you see a positive portrayal of yourself or your experiences on a TV show, that builds positive self-esteem, that connects up to that. If you don't see yourself, or you see negative portrayals, I think the research and the data shows that you're going to feel the consequences of that as well. That that it will limit self-esteem, and it will, it can manifest itself in ways where it's just, this is not the story, this is not the shows that I want to watch, so I am not going to watch them. From that sort of perspective.
Yeah, literally can limit your imagination, right? The whole
Yeah.
idea, if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? You can literally, facilitate, children's and teenagers. This is my cat, Wayne.
I
and
see
want
that.
to say she's very supportive of everything you said.
That's fantastic.
She wanted to jump in and put her support behind it. So literally the idea, you can't see it, you can't be it, and helping people imagine different futures for themselves in different types of scenarios and so on. And I was sort of thinking about that. I think what you said about it being sort of a business imperative, as well as sort of like the right thing to do, is
Sure.
really useful, right? As the populations within the United States diversify, it makes good business sense to tell more representative stories, and it's also
Absolutely.
just like a human thing to do. So I'm wondering, if I'm thinking about this question sort of for students who may be thinking about these issues for the first time, could you sort of walk us through what all the different dimensions of how telling authentic stories benefits Disney television animation sort of in the long term, right? In the short term and in the long term, like what are all the benefits that accrue to you?
So the long term, again, you're grateful you had shared the questions that we were going to talk about. So I was thinking about the long term one. And that's a little bit harder question to answer, only because I feel like we are just really digging into this work right now. You're sort of in the middle of it. So in terms of what that long-term benefit is, I can tell you what we're shooting for, certainly.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And the obvious answer would be to continue to provide a culture in which all people felt safe to be their authentic selves, in which in turn would create an environment of talented storytellers that would always provide content that relates to that diverse audience, as we mentioned earlier. So from a business point of view, the long-term benefits, obviously, the broader your audience, the more the company will benefit. From a moral, for lack of a better term, point of view, a culture where everyone feels like they have a seat at the table, you'll have a happier, passionate, motivated group of employees who would equate a healthier workspace and a higher quality of product to present to, again, to the audience that we are trying to relate to. So that to me is sort of the long-term benefits here. I mean, as it relates to, you were asking about, also one of the questions you had was the biggest accomplishment related to leading with empathy and equity and integrity. And it's funny that, if you ask my assistant, it's literally the hundreds and hundreds of meet and greets that she has had to schedule over the past year, it is sort of the biggest accomplishment. Because, when I took this expanded role in DEI work, I initially didn't know where to start. So I just decided to talk with people, both within and outside the company, to get a sense of what people were thinking with regards to animation, Disney, diversity, and everything that comes with that. And what struck me most was that people just wanted to be heard. people who were trying to break into the industry, people who wanted to know how the animation and entertainment industry worked, artists who wanted feedback on their portfolios, and of course, people who wanted to just get advice on career growth and the like. It was, it was one of those things where I felt like, people understand the competitiveness and competitive nature of companies like Disney. It's tough to get in, it's not easy to get into Disney. There's a lot of competition there. And I think most people understood that. But I think where the sort of disconnect was like, yeah, but I wanted to talk to people about how to prepare for that competition. Like, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? What can I do to better myself, to in essence be invited to the party or be in the race, so to speak? And so that's really what my approach was, and how that relates to the sort of the empathy and the equity aspect of it, and just in terms of feeling like you're being heard. I know that when I was trying to get into the job force, there weren't too many people who were reaching out to me, and there was not too many people you could call on and say, hey, can I get a moment of your time? I think that if at minimum, and if there's nothing else I could do, is try to take as many meetings and meet and greets as possible, within reason and without sort of putting my other responsibilities in any sort of jackpot. Just trying to make sure that people are heard, people that have at least a base level understanding of what it's going to take to break into a company like Disney. So I think that's really, is it worth the time and struggle investment? Absolutely, because again, I think you're going to get a different array of storytellers who are bringing more unique and authentic stories to the table, which is only going to benefit, given that everything that we do at Disney ties to the storytelling aspect, whether it's merchandising, the parks, whatever, it all starts with that story.
Absolutely. And all of the efforts that you're making establishes you as a brand that is trying to do that kind of thing, which in turn probably over the long term attracts more people that you're trying to attract to the brand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's really great. Thank you so much for all of that. One of Sharon's components of her speaker series is a lightning round, which I think I have also prepared you for in advance. But I think given the time, we should probably pivot to that, because I know we have to get to one, and I want to honor our commitment to that. So the first one is, what was the most important lesson you learned in your undergraduate education?
The most important thing I learned, and it's something I did not do. So I went to Syracuse University. I would say for any student right now, whether you're a freshman or a senior, and if you're a senior, get to it right now. But as a freshman, make sure you know and have introduced yourself to your career services folks and your alumni folks, because I will tell you that you as a student, you may not be thinking about specifically a job right now. You may be having fun at school, and that's great and that's important. But the sooner you get to know people in the career services aspect of your school, get to know them, so that when it's time, whether it's internships or jobs, you now have a relationship with these people, and they are going to be more willing and motivated to, like, in essence, help a friend, because that's what you've become with the people. I never tapped into that. It just made my journey that much harder when I left Syracuse and came out to LA. There was not enough. I wish I had more contacts. So that would be don't do what I say, don't do what I didn't do, I guess, is the best advice I could give there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we've been talking a lot about your professional accomplishments, but the second question in the lightning round is, what personal accomplishment fills you with the most pride?
Well, I mean, it's my family. I mean, my career, my professional career has, certainly been animation since I sort of lucked into animation. I certainly didn't have animation on my radar when I first came out to LA, but um, I even tried my own companies a couple of times, and part of the reason for that is, because I didn't want to end up being 80 years old one day and saying, what if I tried that? So, so I tried it. There's not time to discuss what the learnings were from that in terms of success versus failure. Although I will say that I don't know that I'm in this position right now at Disney if I didn't try and to a certain degree fail at doing that. But I will say that the personal is sort of recognizing very quickly that as an independent producer, that wasn't going to be best for my family, and I felt like, to a certain degree, I guess I need to get a real job and be able to take care of my family. And certainly, with my kids are teenagers now, but in my tenure at Disney, they were small kids, and we grew up going to Disneyland, so that was a lot of fun too.
Excellent, thank you. What's your favorite television series of all time?
Are we talking animation or
Nope.
just anything? Wow, that's a hard question. Well, I grew up really interested in detective shows. I think Columbo back in the day was, because I can still turn on an episode of Columbo knowing everything that happened, and I still will watch that. Of recent times, a big Game of Thrones fan, so I think I would use that right now as what my favorite, most recent TV show is.
All right. What about favorite musician or band?
Oh, that's a little bit harder. I would say that I had very eclectic taste growing up with music. I mean, there's a little bit of R&B, there's a little bit of punk, a little bit of rock. I mean, I guess, I guess a guilty pleasure, I might say, is probably the Bee Gees.
I love it. But they have a lot of credibility with the recent documentary. So now everybody
Absolutely.
knows the Bee Gees.
Oh, that was very well done, by the way.
It was very well done. It was.
Yes.
All right. So what quality do you most admire or cherish in others?
Well, I think we talked about that. Empathy. I think certainly a lot has happened over the past year, from the pandemic to the social unrest to the political sort of complications. So I will use that term. I think whenever you find what I tried to do over this past year is find good stories. I post a lot on LinkedIn. That's my social media of choice, and it was very easy to follow bad news because it was all around you. You couldn't escape it. So what I tried to do is just find stories and things that just were, hey, there's still some good here, and more often than not, those type of stories are tied to people just being empathetic. Plain and simple. I just think that the do unto others mentality, the understanding that everybody has things that are impacting them in a very serious way. So just try to put yourself in their shoes, be grateful for what you have, and try to help when you can. So I think empathy is would be the answer to that question.
Such an elegant pivot to the last question too. It's just amazing. So what are you most excited about for the future, or what gives you the most hope for the future?
Well, certainly I have benefited I say this often. So in the midst of the pandemic and in the midst of the social unrest from last summer, in the midst of all this chaos that we had, one of the things that I wasn't sure I could do when the pandemic started was do school presentations the way I normally do. I certainly wasn't that familiar with Zoom. It was new for all of us. And even when I started taking meeting on Zoom, it's just like, well, my school presentations are going to have to take a back seat now. And then something very interesting happened. I got comfortable with Zoom. And I think it was USC who reached out to me to sort of say, hey, we had to cancel our events in March, but would you be willing to do it on Zoom? And, it would only be about 250 to 300 students. And I was like, but we tried it. It was nerve-wracking, but we did it. And, for me, it was like, well, if I can do 250 or 300, I can do any number. So really what happened was, when you're at a company like a big corporation like Disney, you always have performance reviews and goals that you're setting out for the year. And prior to the pandemic, my goals were like, oh, I want to do 8 to 10 school presentations this year. That would be sort of kind of doubling up what I did last year, I am probably up to around 60 right now because of the ability to do these presentations now. So I will say that as much as I enjoyed meeting people face to face, I think the reality is like this COVID can go away tomorrow miraculously, and I don't think I'm getting on planes to go to do I get more. I can get to more students, more schools. I can do it. I can double up on schools on different divisions. But a school like say Chapman University has an animation department, a screenwriting department, the Black Student Union. I can do all 3 presentations for them, and it's fine. So it has allowed me opportunities to do things like this. But what it really meant for me why I have hope for the future, giving school presentations especially during last summer was very cathartic for me. But what the hope for the future is in terms of the faces that I saw out there, it was sort of a coming together of, in the midst of all this stuff, there were still a group of people, students in particular, who were, I'm trying to find the right word for it. Just they acknowledged what was going on, but their focus and force was still, hey, how do I get a job? How can I, what can I do? And it came from all different, diverse students, and it just came from everybody. And it filled me with hope, just because, in the midst of all this stuff, there was still a lot of positiveness that I sort of felt, and I want to hold on to that. And that to me is the hope that I have for the future, along with obviously, my own kids, is that there is a great group of students who are coming into our industry who will just sort of raise the bar in terms of the storytelling that we're doing here at Disney and elsewhere.
100%.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
My
We
pleasure.
certainly are the beneficiaries of your newfound Zoom expertise. So we, again, really, really appreciate you making the time for us. This was just such a great opportunity to share with students some of the ways that people who are actually doing this out in the business are thinking about it, integrating these different values into, every part of the storytelling process, production process, marketing process. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
At this point, we're going to pivot to Sharon, who is going to be running the Q&A.
Great.
Thank you so much, Jay and Kristin. This has been a wonderful session. We have a ton of questions, and now 13 minutes to get as many answered as we can. So I'm going to start with Nick Chambers.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to ask, how does Disney, a very kind of family-friendly brand, incorporate diverse work into their portfolio and address topics like racism without causing too much controversy?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, and you know, as I sort of alluded to earlier with Kristin, in terms of the work we're doing right now, you know, there isn't a one specific answer to that because you're sort of in the middle of this transition. I mean, I think everybody realized that given the events of last summer, there was a true focus on not only the issues that were facing us externally, just in terms of racial injustice and what have you, but it also opened the door to look within. And as much as you know, we look at our work first, and we look at the work and the content that we're doing, and always trying to sort of move the needle in a positive direction as it relates to diverse themes, opening up the idea of diverse themes and characters being front and center of our content. We knew we still had a lot of work to do on that. So, and at the same time, and again, specifically referencing the fact that I work in the kids side of it, you have to be even extra careful. So, you know, part of that is starting to create and develop content that has a broader appeal to our diverse audience, as we mentioned earlier. So just from that standpoint, you know, looking at our development slate and what's coming up, we have more content that's coming out that has more diversity in its characters and its themes. We have the Proud Family show that we had done several years ago. We're doing a reboot of that for Disney Plus. There's another show we're doing with our partners at Marvel called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, which has a 13-year-old African-American girl as the lead. On the Disney Junior side, we've had Doc McStuffins, we have other shows, and Elena of Avalar, shows that sort of highlight some of the different cultures and heritage. Mira Royal Detective was another show that we certainly did. So from the content side, we are sort of more in tune with wanting to bring out more, diverse content. On the hiring side, that's again part of looking internally and sort of looking at what our hiring practices are. Part of the reason that I'm doing these type of presentations and going to different schools and doing that is so that we can bring more diverse talent within the studio, so that there's a balance to the type of content and the sort of culture, the internal culture that we have. And I'm happy to say that we have sort of made a lot of strides in terms of some of the strategies and mentorship programs, internship programs, advocacy programs within the studio, which is great. Is there still a whole lot more work to do? Absolutely. And that's why I say we're sort of in the midst of doing this. It's just like, I can't sit here and say, we're right on track right now, and this is where we want. No, I mean, this stuff can't happen overnight, but I think the easiest way to answer that, there's a sincere want for all of us to change, what culture looks like throughout all the work that we're doing. And I am happy about the progress we made, but with an acknowledgement that there's still a whole lot more work to do.
Wonderful. Nick, thank you for your question. Next, I'd like to call on Anna Langerer for her question, which is sort of a follow-up to this question.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Sure can, thank you.
Great, thanks. Sharon had said that we had talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious to hear more about the history of the DEI work in the television animation department. Was there a DEI position before you started your work? And then also, how has the position evolved over the past few years?
So, no, to the first part of the question, it was interesting that, and again, I sort of talk about this, I come from the creative side. So typically at most companies, and not just entertainment companies, but companies in general, your DEI work tends to be centered in your HR departments. And we have an incredibly supportive HR team at Disney, as you might imagine, but it was important for me that that this work was done by somebody who was more tied to the creative side, because, you know, I don't know that an HR person can come to Emerson and speak to the screenwriting class, you know, and make that much of an impact. The reason why I feel like I connect with students and I connect with creatives is because I can speak to the truth. And the truth is, part of the reason I wanted to take on this role is, like, I wanted to see more balance in our writers' room. I wanted to see more balance in the type of people who are pitching us shows. I wanted to see more diversity in our production teams. And because I was part of that, I was immersed in that. And I thought, you know, what our HR department does, I can't do. Like, that's not my world. You know, if my job was sort of focused in there, then it's taking away from from tying that sort of DEI work back to the creative aspects of what I do. So, and to where you asked, where has it changed? So my priorities then were sort of talent outreach. You know, it was really externally focused. It was outwardly focused. Again, I sort of used the tentpole of what happened past summer as, you know, if anybody who's working in the DEI space has that in their title, their jobs changed dramatically last May 25th. It just did. You know, you went from whatever your priorities were to an intense sort of really digging back in and having some really challenging, difficult, and awkward conversations internally with regard to how people were feeling about their career growth, or how they felt like they've been treated within the studio, and put intentionality aside, because it didn't matter if there was any sort of intentionality to it. In some cases, there maybe they were, in some cases weren't, but that didn't matter. The fact of the matter is that we all collectively, as a studio, as a company, had to acknowledge that there was a problem before you could do any changing in that problem. So for me specifically, how it's changed, how my job has changed over the past 3 years, was that I have a little bit more balance now in terms of, I still do the outreach that I do. I think that's still important, but you also have to sort of tie that more directly to making sure that the people who are already at Disney feel safe and feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work, and feel like there are paths for career growth, and feel like if people are feeling marginalized or not sort of getting the same opportunities as others, then we need to fix that. We need to dig into that, and we need to ask the question why. And I think the most important aspect to that is there has to be a sincere commitment and intentionality to fixing that. You know, that's where that word comes back in. You know, there may not have been an intentionality of keeping somebody, so to speak, down, but there has to be an intentionality in terms of acknowledging that that's how people are feeling, and it's their truth. How are we going to change that culture? And I think that's really where a lot of our most recent work has focused on, in terms of training and education and consulting and putting people in a position to feel safe in sharing their views on what their experience has been, and coming up with ways to change that.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question. And so I'm going to call on Jacob Demick.
Hey, thanks so much for coming today. It's been super informative. Yeah, I was wondering, what is your advice to an aspiring screenwriter looking to break into the industry? You talked a little about the apprenticeship program, and if you had any advice on making yourself stand out, or any other advice besides that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in the few minutes we have, that would be a challenging question. So here's what I'm going to do for everybody. Anyone who's listening, I've always been told not to do this, but I never sort of, I just do it and hope for the best. I am going to put, if everyone can see the chat, I'm going to put my email in the chat for everybody. Reach out to me, whether it's at my email or on my LinkedIn page. And I can, it's just easier to have that conversation with you one-on-one via email or what have you, you know, where I can give you some of the specifics of what I look for when I'm reading a script, you know, as it relates to the Disney brand, as it relates to live action versus animation. There are a lot of different elements that go into that. There is no one easy answer to give you in the time we have here. So if everybody can see that, you know, just, you know, if you email me, just remind me where you got my email address so I can have that context. Absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Jay. So generous of you. And Kristin, thank you so much for your questions. This has been an incredible session, wrapping up our 4 sessions. Kristin, thanks for the shout out. I could not have done it without our village. You know, it takes a village. We think is an old African proverb, but we'll give credit to Hillary Clinton a little bit. Thank you, everyone. Brent and Cynthia from the department, Luann and Amala for making everything happen, helping with the brainstorming, Paul and Molly and Albert for doing everything on the back end. It really has been incredible. We thank you so much for participating, and these sessions will all be made available on the School of Comm YouTube channel. I believe that we will make it known to you when they're available for viewing. So thank you so much. And we'll keep living our life with empathy, equity, and integrity.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.